really can't be going anywhere. I end up throwing in the call for the extra 405. So we are playing an absolutely ginormous pot, 3,600, over 3,600.
Hey YouTube.
G'day everyone, welcome back to the vlog. It's currently about 6 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, and word on the street is there's been a bunch of new COVID cases in Victoria, which means Melbourne's probably going to go into another lockdown tomorrow. No official word on it yet, but just judging by past history, it's probably a thing that's going to happen. So I'm going to a home game tonight. It's one we've been to plenty of times at this point with usually does PLO double board bomb pots. So excited to play the game, particularly since this is the last time I'm probably going to be able to play live poker for a while. So definitely keen to get a good session in. Really going to try and play my A grade and walk out with a well-performed session for my last one for hopefully not too long, but chances are it'll be a couple of weeks. So let's not waste any more time and get in that action.
So I've been to the game at about 6:30 p.m. and we started out playing 1-3 initially, although I'm not sure why, because everyone at the table brought in for 1,000, and you'll see the game started as a 1-3, but didn't stay that way long. Let's find out what I mean and get into the first hand. So we're kicking things off with a bit of 1-3, and I'm on the button with Queen 10 offsuit. I raise it up to 10, then the action's around to a loose aggressive big blind who goes ahead and 3-bets it to 40. Now typically if we were sub 200 big blinds deep, we'd probably just fold Queen 10 offsuit to a 3-bet, just because particularly out of the big blind where their 3-bet range is going to be a bit tighter. But we're over 330 big blinds effective here, and I think just because we're going to be able to play this pot in position when we are so deep stacked, I don't think I'm folding any hand I'm opening on the button to this size of a 3-bet. So I throw in the call, and then we heads up to a flop of 10-5-4 with 2 hearts. A pretty good flop for us. We do flop top pair, and the opponent checks it over to me. Definitely want to go ahead and bet for value here. I think the opponent's going to have a bunch of ace-x hands in their check call range, pretty much all the ace-kings, all the ace-queens. I just really want to get a maximum value from those hands. They're going to call a larger size bet on the flop as a float when we are so deep stacked. So I go ahead and make it 60, and then the opponent throws in the call. So it heads up to a turn, which is the 6 of clubs. The opponent checks it over to me again, and pretty interesting whether this is a spot that's too thin to go for value or not. There definitely is a high likelihood that the opponent was playing check call with an overpair, jacks through aces on the flop, so a bit concerned I do lose hands like that. Also, a hand like 6-5 suited does make a lot of sense, and I think most of their 8-7 suited are probably just going to bet on the flop or check raise on the flop, but some of them might have played check call. So there are a few things we lose to, and some of the weaker hands in my opponent's range, like pocket 9s, pocket 8s, probably just going to fold to a continued barrel. Some of their ace high might fold as well, so yeah, I think maybe a bit too thin to go for value here. Of course, in game I did go ahead and try and get that thin value. I made it 150. If I had this decision back though, I probably would just check. And the opponent throws in the call. So it heads up to a river, which is the 6 of spades, repeating the 6. The opponent checks it over to me again, and if I thought going for value on the turn was too thin, definitely way too thin on this river. I could even see a hand like Jack 10 potentially hero folding, being that I have shown so much strength over 3 straights, and I do have a few 6x hands in my range as well. So I just go ahead and check my Queen 10 back, and the opponent shows pocket kings. It's not quite the start to the session we wanted, but let's see if things turn around from here. A few hands after that one, we decide to cut the crap and just make the game a straight 5-5 with everyone buying in so deep, and the action falls to my cutoff with 4-3 of spades, and I open it up to 20. It's definitely a looser open from the cutoff, but there's a specific reason why I'm being a bit looser in the cutoff, and you'll see why in a minute, because the action falls to the big blind, and it is the return of the Panda. Let's go, Panda is back in the game, looking to mix in, get a bit of action, and he throws in the call in the big blind. So it heads up to a flop of 10-8-8 with 2 spades. Panda checks it over to me, and being that we do have a flush draw and like the second nut low showdown value, I think this is a good hand to bluff with for sure. Don't expect Panda to fold that often to my C bets, but if they ever are folding like 6 high or something, we've got to be making EV, and with the front door flush draw, I think it's a good spot to go ahead and C bet bluff. I make it 25, and then Panda throws in the call. So it heads up to a turn, which is the 6 of clubs. Panda checks it over to me again, and getting a bit dicey. I really do think if they have any single pair hand, they're going to continue to float. Maybe even ace high will continue to float. But the thing is, we have so little showdown value and so much equity with our flush draw. I still think even if we can fold out a hand like king high or queen high, it's still worthwhile going for it with this hand. So I put in another barrel. I go ahead and make it 50. And then Panda tanks a little bit. He even pump fakes folding, before throwing in the call. So I got a bit bluffed out by the pump fake, but not sure what it means. We're just going to hope we hit a spade on the river. So the river is the king of diamonds. It is not a spade, unfortunately. Panda checks it over to me again, and look, I do think the chances that they call with any single pair hand is pretty likely, but if we did ever have a king X in this spot, we would definitely go ahead and bet it for value. And if they ever do fold a hand like pocket sevens or ace-6 or something like that, 6-4 offsuit, then we're going to be making a bunch of EV by using some bluffs, and we only have 4 high. I think it's one of the better hands to use as a bluff. So despite all my instincts telling me that they're probably not going to fold to this bet, I go ahead and mix in the bluff anyway. I go ahead and make it 100, and then after tanking maybe 10 seconds, they end up folding. Let's go. We actually get the bluff through with 4 high. Definitely feels good, and yeah, not really sure if I like my play or not, considering the opponent, but we got it through, so I can't complain with results. Next hand, I'm in the low jack with the best hand in all of poker, all time, number one. Let's go, pocket aces. I raise it up to 20, and then Panda calls in the big blind. So it heads up to a flop of king 9-5 with 2 spades. When they check it over to me, definitely want to go ahead and bet a hand as strong as pocket aces here. I go ahead and make it 30, and then they throw in the call. So we get to see a turn, which is the queen of diamonds. They check it over to me again. I see no reason to slow down at this point. I think I'm getting it called by any king X, any 9X, or even any potential, a few of the queen X's that the opponent's going to have, like queen 10 and queen jack, probably going to call as well. So I go ahead and bet 75, and then they tank a little bit before check raising me to 160. So I'm somewhat concerned that I'm behind, actually. King queen seems like a hand they could definitely have. Queen 9 as well, jack 10 offsuit, also very potential hands they could have. So there is a lot I lose to at this point. Having said that though, getting this good of a price to call, I really do think it would be a mistake to fold a hand as strong as ace high, because sure, my opponent could have jack 10 offsuit, they could also have 9-8 offsuit, they could also have 6-7 offsuit that they're turning into bluffs, front door spades as well. So I really don't want to go anywhere with my pocket aces here. I throw in the call, and then we get to see a river, which is the jack of diamonds. Definitely not a good river, does put out a 4-liner to any 10, and then they tank a little bit before deciding to check it over to me. We have the easiest snap check back in the world. I think if the opponent has any hand stronger than pocket aces, they're probably planning to check call, and any worse hands, probably going to check fold or check raise as a bluff, and either way, we're not getting the result we want. So I go ahead and check it back pretty quickly, and Panda announces 2 pair. And I'm like, it's good, and he turns over jack 5 offsuit. So we did go ahead and river 2 pair on us, but at least we were good when we called on this turn. Next hand, I'm under the gun 7-handed with pocket queens. I go ahead and raise it up to 20, and I get no less than 3 different callers. So we go 4 ways to a flop of queen 5-3 with 2 hearts. Let's go. We do flop the nuts. When the action checks to me, definitely want to go ahead and see bet a hand this strong. For value, I would say is the term I would use for why I want to bet this hand. I go ahead and make it 30, and I get a call from the low jack and Panda in the small blind. So we're still 3 ways to a turn, which is the 2 of diamonds, putting out backdoor diamonds. Panda checks it over to me. Definitely want to continue to bet my hand for value. I think it's very likely I can get called by flush draws. Any queen X is hard because we do block some queen X, but if they do have one, they'll probably still call. So I go ahead and make it 125. And then the action's on the low jack next act, and they go ahead and raise it to 350, and then the action folds back around to Panda, and they go ahead and tank a little bit before ripping it all in for 950. Holy crap, we were excited to shovel money in on the flop and even on the turn, but facing all this action, I'm somewhat concerned that I do lose to a 6-4 offsuit. Definitely a hand that at least the small blind could have, but potentially also the low jack. They're an unknown opponent, so I'm not really sure what they're up to, but wouldn't shock me if they had 6-4 suited at least. So there is some concern that I am behind here. Having said that though, even if the opponents do have a range of hands that includes a lot of straights, but some worse sets, some worse 2 pairs, and some combo draws, we're absolutely getting the right price to stack off here, considering we're calling to stack 2 different people. The pot odds are great, and we do have an extremely strong hand, so absolutely cannot go anywhere with my pocket queens. I go ahead and call the all in for less, and then the action's back on the low jack, and they start to hum and ha a bit, and I'm absolutely stoked they did not snap call there, because I think that 100% they don't have a straight. When they are thinking a bit, very likely they have two pair or a set. Then they start tanking, and then eventually they shrug their shoulders and throw in the call. So we are going three different ways to an all-in, massive pot for a 5-5 game. And then Panda shows King 5 of diamonds, so he does have a diamond draw and a pair. The pair's no good, we've got that drawing dead, but we do have to fade a diamond on the river. And then the low jack shows pocket deuces. So let's go. They have one out we need to fade. We all agree to run it one time in this 2.8k pot. And then we've got the live run out, and the river is the jack of clubs. Let's go. We end up scooping this 2.8k pot, running absolutely hot fire to flop a set when the opponent turned a set in this massive pot. Let's freaking go. Next hand, just tied aggressively on limps under the gun. Then I'm in the low jack with pocket sevens. I go ahead and ISO raise it to 30. And then the same play from the previous hand with pocket deuces, throws in the call, as does Panda in the big blind and the original limper. So we go four different ways to a flop of 7 deuce deuce rainbow. Yep, we do hit the set again, except for this time we have a full house. Let's go. The action checks to me, and definitely want to go ahead and bet my hand for value is the term I would use yet again. I go ahead and make it 50, and then the action's on the hijack, and they go ahead and raise it to 150, so we flop a full house and then get it raised somehow. I think I'm running hot this session. The action folds back to me, and I decide to just call here. Probably not going to have a 3-bet range on this board. If my opponent has a deuce, they're probably going to get all in with them on later streets anyway, and we do want to protect our range a bit here since we're going to have a lot of overpairs in our range. So I throw in the call, and then we're heads up to the turn, which is the 3 of spades, putting out backdoor spades. I check it over to the opponent again. They go ahead and bet 300. Let's go. We're loving that we're still getting action. After the opponent bet 300, they only had about 500 behind. So the decision here is either to call, to continue to slow play, or rip it all in. And I actually much prefer just ripping it all in here. If my opponent does have an airball bluff in their hand, they're probably going to give up on the river anyway when the SPR is only 0.5. And if they don't have an airball bluff, I think it's very likely they'll just call the rest of the all-in. If they did raise on the flop with a hand like pocket 8s, pocket 9s, or pocket 10s, they're probably just going to stack off now anyway, and we'd rather try and get them all in now than if we just call now and lead river. Because if they lead river, there's got to be a bunch of scary rivers for them that are overcards to their overpairs, and that might deter action. So I think it's much better to just rip it all in now, which is what I do. I go ahead and grab all my black chips, put them in the center, and then the opponent hits the tank. They start trying to talk to me to get a read, and I'm just like sitting there trying to keep my poker face. And then after probably a good like 2-3 minutes of tanking, they end up folding their hand. So let's go. We do drag this one in. Maybe we missed a bit of value. We could have just slow played on a second straight and got more value, but I'm not complaining in raking yet another massive pot after flopping a full house. Let's go. Next hand we've got the straddle on, as well as the double straddle. We're playing a bit of a 5, 5, 10, 20, and then a loose aggressive small blind. Aaron opens it up to 70. The tight aggressive big blind Leon calls, and then I'm in the straddle with 7 deuce offsuit, and usually a pretty trivial fold, right? Well, we are playing the 7 deuce bounty game, and I get $15 from the other 7 players if I win this hand. That's enough incentive for me to continue with the hand. I throw in the call, as does the villain in the second straddle. So we go 4 different ways to a flop of Queen Jack Deuce with 2 diamonds. The action checks to me, and I do very heavily consider stabbing at it, but I think it might be a bit ambitious bluffing into 3 different people, although we do have one of the best possible bluffing hands just because of the extra incentive of picking up the bounty. So wouldn't hate bluffing for it here, but I decide to not risk it into 4 different people. I check it back. That might be a mistake in all honesty, and then the second straddle checks as well. So we're still 4 ways to a turn, which is the 4 of spades. When the action checks to me again now, I just absolutely feel like I have to bluff at it. There is so much incentive to not only pick up the 280 in the pot, but the 105 in bounties as well. So I go ahead and bet, particularly when everyone's shown so much weakness. I think I'm much more likely to get the bluff through now than I was on the flop. So I go ahead and bet 150, and then the second straddle calls, and everyone else folds. Okay, so we got 2/3 of the way there. Let's see if we can get there on the river. The river's a 10 of clubs, so it doesn't help us. We don't make a pair, and definitely want to keep bluffing. This is by far the best possible bluffing candidate we could have. We did unblock a lot of hands that are probably going to fold, like 10-9 and King 10 as well, but we need to keep put pressure on just so they don't, check back one of those 10x pairs, or if they call the turn with a jack or something. So I go ahead and bet 300, and it's the same opponent from the previous hand, so they hit the tank for a long time. They ask me, Jack no good, right? And then, I just have to keep the same poker face I did when I had the strong hand. Now that I'm bluffing, I just sit there, keep my poker face, then the opponent ends up folding. Let's freaking go. I slam my 7 deuce down on the table. Not only do I collect the almost $600 pot, but I rake in 105 bounties from everyone as well. Let's go. Next hand, we have a $20 PLO double board bomb pot. You know we love these on the vlog, and I am in what would have been the under the gun position with King, Queen, 9, 6 with 3 clubs. And then we see 2 different flops. I'll pop them on the screen there. You can see pretty good flop on the top board because we do have second nut trips, and we do have a flush draw as well as a few gut shots on the second board. So pretty good flops for us. But when the action checks to me, out of position to 5 different opponents, I still think this is a good spot to check to induce action, see what happens. So I go ahead and check it, and then everyone else on the table checks. So we get to see 2 different turns. The first one's a 4 of spades, the second one's the Jack of Hearts. Jack of Hearts is a great turn for us. It does give us a wrap draw as to go with our second nut flush draw. So when the action checks to me this time, I want to start betting my hand, try and get a bit of value. I go ahead and make it 150, and then what would have been the +1 player throws in the call, and then the action folds around to Aaron, the loose aggressive player in the small blind, and they go ahead and check raise it to 750. The action's on me now, and they have about 1,000 left in their stack after the 750 raise. So I do think there is going to be implied odds for us to call, particularly with such a strong draw on the second board, and it's really going to be hard for them to have a hand that's scooping us on both boards. Ace of clubs, queen with, the nut flush draw on the second board does have us drawing pretty thin, but not completely dead. But I think it's more likely they do have a set on the second board or the first board, in which case we're just like, we are very live against that hand and probably going to win. Probably going to win half of the pot most of the time, and sometimes we'll even quarter them when we get there on the second board. So I really don't think I can go anywhere with this hand. I throw in the call for 750, then the action's back on the +1 player who tanks, probably a good 30 seconds or so. They count out the rest of their stack. They end up going all in for 1,155. So yeah, now I'm very concerned I'm behind. I think it's very likely at least one of these opponents has a full house on the top board and has to have us drawing pretty thin on the second board, or that we're at least behind 2 for the moment on the second board, most notably pocket jacks, pocket tens, or flush draw, combo draw type hand. So pretty scary. And then the small blind takes a little bit before calling the extra 405, and the action's back on me. And look, I'm not absolutely in love with this situation here. Definitely could be behind both opponents at this point. Having said that, though, really don't want to go anywhere when I do have a hand that has draws to the nuts on the second board and pretty strong equity on the first board, because even if the opponents do have a full house, we have at minimum of 6 outs to either hit a king or a 9 to make the nut full house. So absolutely not drawing dead on either board, no matter what the case. When we're getting pot odds this ridiculously good, really can't be going anywhere. I end up throwing in the call for the extra 405. So we are playing an absolutely ginormous pot, 3,600, over 3,600, and we're still not all the way done yet because the small blind still has about 600 left in their stack. So we are heads up to 2 different rivers. The first river, 2 of diamonds, okay. Second river, 8 of clubs, let's go. We make the flush on the river, and then the small blind kind of looks a bit upset and ends up checking it over to me. Then I have the easiest all-in in the world here. I really don't ever expect the opponent to fold, but I'm just hoping they call with a hand that we can scoop, maybe like pocket jacks or pocket tens. Queen 10 as well. This is another hand that we do scoop. So I go ahead and rip it all in, and then the small blind shrugs, throws in the extra 600. I show my hand, and then the small blind shows ace, king, jack, jack. So they had a set of jacks on the second board, which explains the check raise, but we're going to scoop them on both boards because they only have pocket jacks on the top board. So let's go. And then the +1 player shows queen, jack, 10, 7. So let's go. They have a worse trips and only 2 pair on the second board. That means we scoop this whole thing, this over 4,800 pot. We scoop it all. Absolutely running fire hot. Get there on the river and end up scooping both opponents. Let's freaking go. This is one of the biggest pots I have ever won in my poker career, and I can't stop smiling. Next hand, we've got the straddle on, and we've got the button bounty game on as well, and it's worked up to about 70 at this point. So when the loose aggressive cut-off Aaron goes ahead and raises it to 50, and I'm on the button with pocket 7s, absolute slam dunk 3-bet spot. I go ahead and make it 150. Probably could be using a larger 3-bet size here when we're over 3k effective with the cut-off. Maybe something like 200 or even 220 wouldn't be totally out of the question. But I went ahead and made it 150, and then the action's backed around to the cut-off. he throws in the call. So we're heads up to a flop of 8-9 deuce with 2 hearts. Cutoff checks it over to me. Bunch of incentive for us to deny equity to hands like king queen and ace jack. But I think the opponent's going to go ahead and bluff with some of those on the turn, so it might be worthwhile just checking it over to them. Having said that, in retrospect, it might be a bit of a mistake. I think the opponent's going to be much more likely to value bet us going down, knowing that we're going to call them down pretty late with the bout and bounty on. And maybe I'm better off just betting to deny equity myself. Whatever the case, I made what's probably a mistake and checked it back on the flop. So we still go heads up to a turn, which is 6 of spades. Pretty good turn for us. We do turn a open-ended straight draw. The cutoff goes ahead and bets at 100. Easiest call in the world here. Definitely want to keep all of the bluffs in their range. I don't see much use in semi-bluffing when I expect them to call down light with the button bounty. So I throw in the call, and then we still heads up to a river, which is the deuce of diamonds, and the opponent goes ahead and bets 300. So typically we'd be getting 2.7 to 1 on a call, but because of the extra button bounty, you have to factor that into the calculation. We're getting exactly 3 to 1 on a call. We only need to be good 25% of the time here to call. I definitely think it's at least somewhat likely that the opponent's turning Jack 10 or King Queen into a bluff when I do show weakness by checking the flop, and yeah, they're probably just going to put me on a bunch of ace high hands they're trying to put pressure on. So considering we're getting this price, I throw in the call pretty quickly, and then the opponent shows pocket ace, oof. So they flop to set on us, and we are not going to win the button bounty. We have to put $10 on and give it over to the small blind. Goddamn. So we've got one final hand before we wrap this thing up, and boys, it a doozy. So we just decided to just play straight 5-10 at this point, and then a loose aggressive roll opens cut off to 50, panda calls on the button, and then I'm in the small blind with my number one favourite hand of all time in all of poker, pocket aces. Let's freaking go. We are over 2k effective with panda and 5k effective with the cutoff, so definitely want to use a larger 3-bet sizing here just because I expect to get called a lot when I'm out of position to 2 people. So I go ahead and 3-bet it to 300, and then the action's on the big blind, who decides to cold call the 300, and then both the cutoff and button call as well. So we're in a casual 4-way 1.2k pot to a flop of King 9-6 with 2 hearts. The action starts off on me, and I'm probably not going to have a c-betting range into 3 different people on this board, even with a hand as strong as pocket 9s or pocket kings. Probably just going to go ahead and check it over to opponents to induce action, and when we do have pocket aces, I think even more incentive to check it over and induce bets from worse hands. So that's what I do. Then the action checks to the cutoff, who goes ahead and bets 400. Then panda calls on the button, action back on me, and I do consider check raising here, facing the 1/3 pot size bet. I do think King Queen with a backdoor draw, or stuff like Jack 10 that has a gut shot might continue to float, but probably a bit too thin. Somewhat concerned that I do lose to pocket 9s and pocket 6s, which I think both the cutoff and button can have, and maybe even the cold caller in the big blind. So I decided to just call. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. I think it's an interesting spot. And then the big blind does call as well. So we are still 4 ways to a turn. The turn's a beautiful one. It is the ace of diamonds. Let's go. We turn top set. And now I briefly consider leading out here now that we do have the nuts. Just because if we did have a bluff here, like Queen 10 suited or Jack 10 suited or something like that, it probably would be a great spot for us to lead and represent basically pocket aces. So we should probably do that when we have pocket aces as well. But I do decide to check in-game as well, just because I do expect to get a lot of folds here. And the only hands that aren't going to fold are sort of like 2-pair plus that will probably bet off themselves once check to. So I go ahead and check it over to them to let them bet off those hands. Yet again, pretty interesting spot. Let me know if you would lead on the turn or not there. So I check it through. I check it over to the big blind, who checks, as does the cutoff and the button. So no action there. We are still 4 ways to the river, which is the Queen of Clubs. Kind of a good river just because Ace Queen and King Queen will definitely pay us off now, but a little bit of concern we do lose to Jack 10 that didn't want to bluff on the turn. So definitely want to go ahead and bet for value to try and get called by 2 pair, but don't want to go too big and scare those hands off when my range is going to look really strong on this board. So I go ahead and bet 800, and then all 3 opponents fold super quickly. So probably not that much value for us to get there. Probably not that many strong hands in any of the opponents' holdings, but happy to take down one last big pot before we wrap this session up with a pretty nice win, to be honest. So there you have it. Those were the most interesting hands I played this session, and oh my god, what a session. Like, even for a super session, I san ran during this one. just a monster win. But in terms of how I actually feel about the quality of my play this session, I'm going to land on a B plus. I really do like a lot of the decisions I made this session, but I think the largest part of my win was just me like coolering people and getting there in high EV spots. I do think earlier on in the session when I played that Queen 10 offsuit hand, I was overvaluing my hand a bit when I bet so much on the turn. I think it might be a good spot to check that, and yeah, just overplaying my hand there a bit when my opponent does have so many stronger overpairs in their range, as well as running the bluff on Panda with a 4-3 suited. That might be a bit too dicey, and maybe I should dial it back a bit and wait to bet strong hands there. But it did work, so maybe, who knows what they folded, maybe it was a good spot to go for it. But in terms of all the massive hands I played, largely just coolers and me getting there, so really hard to misplay when hands are that easy. So really it doesn't feel right to go to an A grade level when it was largely just me running good that had such good results, particularly when I have some things I need to improve on. But I don't think I made any colossal mistakes either, so can't go too low. B plus feels pretty fair for this session, in all honesty.
Okay, so I'm about a week removed from the game at this point. Unfortunately, since then, Melbourne has gone back into lockdown. I have no idea when we're going to get out, so definitely glad that I had a sun run on my final live poker session before this lockdown. Don't worry, I got a few backlogged vlogs, and hopefully we'll be back in some live poker action before too long. But in terms of the results from this specific session, ended up buying into the game for 1,200 and cashing out for 8,300. So I think that's the biggest win we've ever had on the vlog, and it came at a perfect time when I'm not going to be able to play poker for a few weeks. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end of the vlog. That really helps my channel's analytics, and I do appreciate it. If you haven't already, hop in the comments below, give me your thoughts on these individual hand histories. Despite me running just fire hot, did I make any mistakes during these hand histories? Don't be shy to let me know, and hit that subscribe button to get my next vlog when it comes out. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.